This video is about the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium that we would use in evolution to figure out whether the allele frequency would change in a population. If the allele frequency would change, that means microevolution takes place in that population. Let's assume a population with 50 organisms. We will use the Mendelian peas, the green peas, that they can come from homozygous dominant and heterozygous, as well as the yellow peas that they are homozygous recessive. The recessive alleles are the yellow alleles, and let's assume that we will have 40 alleles in the gene pool. The recessive alleles frequency, we are going to use the letter Q for that. It's 40 over 50 times 2 because we are dealing with alleles. The answer is 0.4 for the recessive allele frequency. The dominant allele frequency, as we saw in the lab a couple of classes ago, and the recessive allele frequency adds up to 1. If we use the letter P for the dominant frequency and the letter Q for recessive, their sum is adding up to 1. Now, we know that the recessive allele frequency is 0.4. The dominant allele frequency will be 0.6 in this case. Now, let's draw the population's alleles. The alleles is altogether 100 alleles, and one line will represent 10 alleles. We have 6 green lines and 4 yellow lines that representing the alleles in that population. 40% yellow alleles, recessive, and 60% green alleles. Now, it's also important to point out that the gametes that they form, the sperms as well as the eggs, their allele distribution will follow the population's allele distribution. 60% of the sperms will carry the green allele and 0.40% will carry the yellow allele. Same with the eggs, the distribution of alleles in the gametes. That's really important. On the next page, let's go and use kind of a Punnett square what we used, but the Punnett square was for the individuals. Now the square for us is going to be for the population relative to the allele frequency. The top line will represent the sperms and their frequency in the population, and we said that the dominant allele will be in 0.6 frequency, and the vertical line will represent the egg frequencies, whether they are going to carry the dominant or the recessive allele. So in here we have the P, the dominant for the sperm is 0.46 and the recessive 0.4. That's the same for the eggs. Here we see that if we pull down the 0.4 and 0.4 from both sides, that square represents the probability that the organisms will turn into yellow. The probability to be yellow is Q times Q, or Q squared. So 0.4 times 0.4 is 0.16. 16% of the organisms in that population, if the genetic material doesn't change and the Hardy-Weinberg principle is 2, that is the population's percent. For homozygous dominant, it's P times P equals P squared, so it's going to be 36% of the organisms will have homozygous dominant genotype. The heterozygous, it's P times Q, P times Q. For one square is 24%. For the other one is also 24%. And we have, keep it in your mind that we have two squares for, two rectangles for 24%. So homozygous dominant organism, 36%. The population is 50. So 50 times 0.36 is 18 organisms altogether that they will be homozygous dominant. The heterozygous organisms, 24% plus 24%, so it's a 48% altogether. If the population size is 50, what we stated, now 24 organisms will be heterozygous in that population. Homozygous recessive is 16%. The population 16% is 8 organisms. So that's how we would use the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, figuring out the different type of genotypes in a population. This is kind of summing up the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. P plus Q got to be 1. This is the area and the probability. Now, area of that P plus Q, the allele frequencies sum is P plus Q times P plus Q equals the sum, squaring the sum of P plus Q, and it's equals to 1 squared, and 1 equals P squared plus 2PQ times plus Q squared. This is also important, and that's what we are going to use in class. Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium happens only when no mutations happens in the population, random mating takes place, no natural selection happens, extremely large population is taken into consideration, and no gene flow happens in the population. Done.